Good day and welcome to the NESG radio. My name is Rafiat Lawa. I work with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. The topic for today's podcast is profitable protection, that's the business advantage of food fortification compliance. And I'll be discussing this important topic with Dr. Adeyemi Oluwole Opeoluwa and Ms. Stella Ayodele Elizabeth. So starting off with introduction, Dr. Adeyemi Opeoluwa is the Deputy Director, Scientific and Head of Business Development at the Institute of Public Analysts of Nigeria. Dr. Opeoluwa holds a PhD in Sustainable Development and Diplomacy, an MBA in Economics. He also holds an MSc and BSc in Industrial Chemistry. He also has about 2 decades of consulting expertise in all projects and program development phases. It's nice to have you here, Dr. Adeyemi. So Ms. Stella Ayodele Elizabeth is the Country Program Manager, Food Fortification at Technosave. Just to highlight that Technosave is country-wide implementation of large-scale food fortification initiatives. Ms. Stella is a biochemist with public leadership training from Cornell University. Thank you very much for being here, Ms. Stella. So let's just get right into the business of today. So, Ms. Stella, I would like to start with you. So there has been so much clamor about food fortification. Can you please elaborate on food fortification and its importance, especially to businesses?
Thank you, Rafiat. And yes, I'm happy to be on this podcast this morning because food fortification is a well-established strategy. It's been recognized globally and it's been in existence for over 4 decades with empirical evidence on its effectiveness on managing and helping to alleviate micronutrient deficiencies. Let me start by building a little context.
Meaning that you're sure that they will perform fortification processes, which confers that they are self-regulating, not just self-regulating, but they are prepared to be also investigated to show that their processes and systems are in place. Obviously, when you have systems, processes in place, and good governance in a firm organization, the effect is on the product, whether you're dealing with a tangible or intangible product. In the case we're talking about fortified various food products. So one of the things you're going to get is market confidence. Another you're going to get is basically...
Now, before food fortification is established in any community, for instance, in Nigeria, where food fortification actually started in the 90s with the addition of iodine and salt. And then by 2002, we had signed up for the addition of several micronutrients in wheat flour, edible oil, sugar, and salt. Now, the country has decided that yes, there is a certain amount of deficient micronutrients, particularly vitamin A, iron, zinc, folic acid, and B vitamin. And secondly, that we are able to process these foods in an industrial scale. Now, because these are the drivers of choosing the food vehicles. One, it has to be at an industrial scale for production, and that's where the businesses come in. And secondly, the food has to be consumed by a large number of the population. It has to be accessible, available, affordable. Now, where does the business come in here? What's the business case for a business person, for a manufacturer, a producer to fortify? There are indirect benefits to fortification that will, at the end of the day, impact a business. I'll start with maybe one. For instance, I think it's been established by the World Bank and then, the statistics that Nigeria loses $1.5 billion annually on the control of micronutrient deficiency. And Technosave did a premix study in the early 2020s. And if, for instance, we're going to comply fully by the industrial standards for wheat flour fortification, for edible oil fortification, and for sugar fortification, it will cost us about $50 million. Now, imagine the relative difference between 1.5 billion and just 50 billion at 100% compliance. Now, the government, the nation will be able to get back so much into the economy So rather than using money to solve health challenges that could have been avoided by just adequate nutrition, we could use that money for infrastructure that will benefit the business. And in the long run, if the people, the masses are adequately nourished, right? The children, women of reproductive age, adolescents will grow to their full potential. Meaning when you, as an employer, when you engage labor, you are engaging labor that is optimal, that will not call in sick, that will not be able to think proactively and creatively because they have developed at their optimal cognitively. So that is how businesses are able to indirectly recoup their investment in food fortification. And I'll stop at that for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stella, for that insightful explanation. So, Can you hear me, ma?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, can you tell us some tangible benefits that food producers should expect in the long and short term if they incorporate fortification in their processes, just like you've established earlier?
Okay, so continuing from where I stopped, if companies establish food fortification, for one, they would avoid regulatory non-compliance and punitive measures that are taken by regulatory agencies, because fortification of these staples, some of these staples are mandatory, meaning there is an ethical consequence. There is a legal consequence for not abiding by that legislation. So they must do it. If they do it, they will be able to avoid fines that will be levied against them. And of course, those fines can be used to train more food handlers. It can be used to do other business, be invested into inventory and whatever else that will benefit the business. And of course, they can also use this as the fact that they are doing the right thing. Number one, they can use it as a marketing edge for themselves, as a badge of quality that they can communicate to the public that we do the right things. For instance, one of the initiative or innovations that TechnoServe brought to bear in the last 2 years is called the Micronutrient Fortification Index. And what this does and how it helps businesses that are adequately fortifying and complying with this standard is that it helps them to announce their brands to the public. Therefore, when a consumer is making that purchasing decision, it goes first for quality before price. We've done a number of consumer surveys, and it highlights that consumers would always choose quality, sometimes even over price, as much as we think that, yes, there's this economic crunch, but I want value for that money that I'm spending. And food is one of those, it's one of the expenses that takes the most from, the average family, the average household. Therefore, if a producer has done the right thing and, for instance, is participating on the micronutrient index, they can use this as a continuous badge of quality. Additionally, by participating, for instance, on this MFI index, foreign direct investors are able to view responsible and accountable businesses in Nigeria. And when they want to come into the country, maybe they want to make a purchase or they want to acquire or merge or invest in the business, they go for those top-ranking businesses because they know that for a company to have gone through this sort of index, that means they have their documentation, they have their practice, their governance, they have everything correct. As the youth will say these days, they've come correct. So therefore, they will be able to what? They will be able to attract foreign investments. In addition to, just the usual increase in their sales as a result of that brand of quality. So there's an advantage that is directly commercial, but there's also the one that is incommercial. There's the social imperative for doing what they're doing, right? So because at the end of the day, businesses have to be socially responsible these days, right? So it's not just about profit anymore. You have to think about the people, you have to think about the planet. So doing the right thing by complying to fortification standard that landscape is changing with the advent of this kind of accountability innovations like the MFI. Thank you.
We all know that all businesses are profit-oriented. So can you briefly explain how complying with food fortification policies offer business advantages?
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Stella has said quite a lot, and I wouldn't want to reiterate all what she said again. Basically, when businesses comply with fortification legislation or regulations, it puts them in a position of market confidence. I think Ms. Stella did mention about this. Meaning that you're sure that they will perform application processes, which confers that they are self-regulating, not just self-regulating, but they are prepared to be also investigated to show that their processes and systems are in place. Obviously, when you have systems, processes in place, and good governance in a firm organization, the effect is on the product, whether you're dealing with a tangible or intangible product. In the case we're talking about fortified and various food products. So one of the things you're going to get is market confidence. Another you're going to get is basically international recognition and local recognition, like Ms. Stella rightly said. There's also the unintended consequence of a greater market share. When your products perform, for example, if I take wheat fortified with iron, and then basically I found out that the anemia in a certain area goes down because of a certain product that is being consumed, then that certain area or population or market would want to prefer that product. So you're going to have an increase in market share. And another thing is that regulatory compliance means that you have better visibility and then from public institutions who actually regulate you. Yeah, so these are one of the positives of complying with fortification regulations or act. Yeah, like the fortification regulations, NAFDAC fortification regulation of is it 17th of August 2021. This is complying with those, whether they are mandatory or non-mandatory requirements. Yeah, they are all contained in that regulations.
Okay, thank you, sir. So leveraging on what you just explained now, can you give some case studies or example of some businesses that have had increase in market share, just like you've explained? Maybe one or two examples.
I have a lot.
Okay.
I have worked quite a lot.
Good.
Yeah, of course. You have PZ Wilma, PZ, Patterson's Oranges, Olam. Olam is a conglomerate working across West Africa, particularly in Ghana. They are fortifying rice now. I'm not too sure if they have started already in Nigeria, but there is a regulation, and there has been meetings that rice should be fortified as a large-scale food product for enriching or reducing malnutrition, hidden hunger, or undernutrition. Also, of course, why would I forget flour mills? Okay. I wouldn't forget flour mills. Not at all. Okay. Impossible. Then, of course, in terms of liquids, we'll look at Nestle, Wamco, West African Milk Company. Also, in terms of our drinks, you could also talk about Nigerian breweries. The malt drinks are fortified, and in Guinness, that's Diageo, also fortifies malt. So we have all these companies having great market share. Because they fortify, and we've verified that the levels of fortifiers or nutritive additions in these products are true, people have confidence in them, and people will always want to buy. So although the end means or the end of fortification is not for profit, because the cost per unit of fortifying it's between 0.5 to 0.75 US dollars, and you have profits of between $26 across a lifetime, compared to an expense of 15 US dollars across a lifetime. That's about 9 to 10 US dollars difference gain. Because the cost per unit is so low, I'm not too sure the companies will want to actually defray the cost of fortifying their products on consumers. But the end is to allow better nutrition, reduce malnutrition, undernutrition, and hidden hunger. That's the end in terms of the policy agenda for large-scale food fortification.
Thank you, sir. That was quite insightful. That's a long list of companies that are quiet compliance. Thank you so much. So moving back to you now, Ms. Stella. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Rofia.
Okay. So I would like to ask, how can adherence to fortification policies influence companies' brands and reputation in the market? And how can this reputation translate into financial gain? Just like you know that all businesses are profit oriented, like that's the primary mandate. So over to you, ma.
Yeah, I think we've sort of trashed that a little bit. Dr. Adeyemi has also buffered some of my points in that, the confidence in a brand is boosted when a company is being compliant and they're able to communicate the same to their consumers. So it directly, by knowing that these brands, he's mentioned quite a few. I think some of these brands should listen to this podcast and pay Dr. Adeyemi for for really giving them free advertisement.
True.
And you can equally go to www.mfi-ng.org and you can see a list of brands. They're all there. Some of the ones they mentioned, PZ, Raffles, that does Power Oil, Emperor Oil, Golden Oil, Sonola, Flour Mills of Nigeria, a couple of their brands, Olam, a lot of brands. These brands are right there for the entire universe to see, right? And therefore, they will be reporting, and especially after the announcement of the highest ranking and the award, because we back this up by an award ceremony. A lot of press is attached to this. And even the companies themselves piggyback on this award and announcement, and they themselves go through social media and the traditional media to elevate their brand. That is going directly into their bottom line by view of additional sales. So that is how a company can directly profit from fortifying. But I think just to buttress on what Dr. Adeyemi mentioned earlier, the essence of mandatory fortification, because there are two types of fortification. There is the mandatory fortification and there's the voluntary fortification, which is market-based. So the likes of the Nestles and the Wancos and the Comasidos and the MBLs of this world are in the voluntary category. They do this intentionally in order to give their brand a marketing edge. They want to say we've got 20 vitamins like Bonvita and all that. They do advertisement. They are allowed to really, really hone in on this marketing drive using that fortification as an edge. However, large-scale food fortification, which is under the ones that are under the mandatory umbrella, are not exactly just until now where Technoserve is disrupting the market and say, hey, yes, food fortification is a government initiative, it's a public health initiative. However, businesses that have to implement this have to be able to have a business case that will drive their compliance. Because even mandatory, yes, but there are a lot of challenges that prevent us from really getting the return on investment on large-scale food fortification. A number of them are weak regulatory compliance because of resources. Nigeria, for instance, is so huge. You have 6 geopolitical zones. Across these zones, you only have I don't think we have up to 5,000 regulatory officers that have to go to the field from Maiduguri to Port Harcourt, from Lagos to Edo. It's huge. So then the resources are thin. So they cannot have this door-to-door oversight over the producers, right? So we're trying to drive a self-regulatory mechanism whereby it's the industry themselves that are putting themselves forward because they are seeing the business case for doing the right thing, meaning they are able to showcase their investment in fortification, and therefore they can apply this in their marketing strategy. And that's what we are trying to drive at these days. And we're seeing the difference, right? So we're trying to attach social good but to profitability. Yes, you're part of, driving the social good for the people. But then at the end of the day, we understand you're in it for business. Therefore, we're giving you this opportunity to use your fortification compliance as a marketing tool. So that's how we're helping businesses. It's new, it's still novel, it's in its teething stage, but we continue to support the private sector to understand and adopt this self-regulatory mechanism that can support them to make profits, even while delivering a social public good through fortification of their product.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that insightful explanation. Thank you very much. So back to you now, Dr. Adeyemi. I know you've explained earlier that food fortification, businesses have direct or indirect benefits from food fortification. So I would like you to briefly explain the role governments can play in ensuring compliance and making the process more financially attractive to producers. Are there any incentives or subsidies that could be put in place just to support the producers? Over to you.
Okay. I would like to really commend what TechnoServe has been doing in the country. They've really made a lot of impact. I just don't want to use the word a lot of impact. They've made very deep and lasting impact in terms of bringing to the fore and into our cognitive reasoning that malnutrition is not just kwashiorkor alone, but there are other aspects of feeding hunger. And I really like the work of Miss Stella. I've known her maybe about 10 years now. Yeah, she's worked with Gain and while she was still in industry, Professor Gumilanko. So in terms of the role of government, it should be a supportive role. I do understand that in Western climes that there's a form of support comes in terms of subsidies also. Not subsidies directly in that respect. You have farmers being supported on the farm by extension workers to ensure that the soils are fertile and that, for example, fertilizers are used rightly and appropriately. Because the end product will mean that the plants that we eventually consume, will take their nutrients from the soil. So it's an indirect intervention from government fortification. But in terms of large-scale food fortification, which is industrial-based, you're using inorganic compounds to fortify the food, especially processed foods, like Stella rightly said, because during processing, a lot of nutritive attributes of food is lost. So you need to reinforce this back, and reinforcing it is by adding addition of vitamins, minerals, and salts, like she rightly said. The only way we could have a very good, I would want to say rich in this is if government supports or lowers maybe, for example, acquisition of equipment. It's quite an expensive venture getting equipment mixers. It's quite expensive getting the premixes. So the government could intervene in these areas. It could also intervene in with respect to lowering of subsidizing with some aspect of production cost, energy costs, maybe giving tax breaks to these producers, or what would want to say mixers or millers, as the case may be. So by so doing, you are encouraging them, like Ms. Stella rightly said, that a business case is created. Because if I'm to fortify my product and I'm doing so at a cost, how do I defray the cost? Well, yes, I did say initially that the cost of fortification is quite low, but it does amount to something eventually when you talk about the amount of food or the amount of material that has to be fortified. It does amount to something substantial. So what will come out of it? We rightly said this earlier that there's a business case, that there's recognition both locally and internationally. There's also increase in market share. So the producers or the users of fortifiers understand this, and that's why they are having more of a self-regulating program going on that. See, we would want to beat even the standards government have set. So in this way, that's on one hand. On the other hand, the only way I can see it, because it's quite a difficult thing now for government to say we are supporting micronutrient fortification with so and so amount, then all other people in health would rise and come and say, why aren't you giving support to Kwashiorkor? Why aren't you giving support to AIDS treatment? Why aren't you giving support to COVID-19? Why aren't you giving support to institutions or firms that produce these drugs or produce materials that are used to mitigate maybe in case of epidemics? So in my opinion, that supporting those who produce, I do mean the millers now, by giving lower import taxes on premixes and energy grants, lower excise charges while producing in country, and then tax breaks. This will be means and methods the government could support and the large-scale food fortification drive in the country. Apart from improving capacity and capabilities of regulatory agencies, especially the legal and then also I want to say the enforcement frameworks. It needs to be more intricate. It needs to, the capacities and understanding of how the entire system works needs to be improved, better improved. It's in place, but of course, there's always room for improvement. Like Mr. Ella rightly said, the reach of regulatory agents. Nigeria is quite a big and massive country. We're still having gaps here and there. There are no overlaps between in terms of regulation, in terms of oversight, in terms of monitoring and evaluating the impact of, for example, some products marketed in our markets or in our supermarkets. There's also the need for post-market surveillance, which falls under the purview of these regulatory agencies. So Ms. Stella rightly said the capacities and capabilities of these institutions need to be improved. That's one way the government can also support the ventures of those who are self-regulating, who are doing the right thing, so that people know and understand that, see, this product is good, and then they have a business case to continue to produce quality and standard goods for the market.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Adeyemi. So, Ms. Stella, this will be my last question for you today on this podcast. So, could you highlight some strategies to encourage consumers to patronize fortified foods?
All right, thank you. Some of those strategies are going to, let me say that the responsibility will be divided between the government, partners, international and local partners, and the companies themselves. It's a collective effort. Okay. There's no silver bullet, and no one person can, provide all of this. And just based off of what Dr. Adeyemi just said, now one way, let's start with the government, is by incorporating indexes such as the MFR index into the supply chain frameworks of government. Now, it's been agreed, there's no argument that there are a lot of micronutrient deficiencies in the country. The numbers, even the gains that were made in the last 20 years has been depleted, continues to be depleted by the ongoing global supply chain disruptions, right? We were just trying to recover from COVID-19, and then wham, we've got the Russia-Ukraine issue, and then Nigeria had its own domestic, political, and economic instability. So households, even when the ones you call the middle class, are unable to afford adequately fortified food. I was at a meeting recently outside the country, and I used an analogy because, when certain decisions are being made, it's very important that we have country realistic context being built into policies, framework, and guidelines. An apple in Nigeria, a nice round red or green apple in traffic or in a store will cost you about 250 naira or 300 naira, right? And the multidimensional poverty index said over 63 or is it 83 million Nigerians are living below $1, meaning hardly can 60 million people, a minimum of 60 million people, afford an apple, just one single apple, right? Now we're talking about people that are even like bottom or base of pyramid. Now working class equally cannot afford vegetables, fruits, all those nice things. We all know that the first line of defense for good health is what? Is food before drugs. And then drugs before you then go into injections and all of that. You know, one of my lecturers will always have that. Do food first. The last thing you should think about is a drug, is a medicine. So therefore, the government can incorporate all of these micronutrients into public social schemes, such as the school feeding programs. By endorsement of companies like the index, the micronutrient fortification index, the government can publicly endorse such initiatives and say, fine, we will discount all of these very fantastic incentives that Dr. Adeyemi mentioned earlier, tariffs, tax holidays, energy tariffs, energy breaks or whatever, or financial packages that are different for producers, or anything that will make them produce cost effectively and be able to deliver adequately fortified foods to consumers at a price neutral way. Anything the government can do is fine. However, how can this initiative be sustainable? My suggestion or my recommendation on this podcast will be one, endorsement of the micronutrient fortification index and incorporation of same into government social safety nets, such that it becomes one of the criteria that the government uses to select producers that will supply IDP camps, for instance, vegetable oil, for instance, rice, for instance, wheat. Any company that is not on such an index have no business doing business with the government in such schemes, because these are even the opportunities to feed masses. Now, on a secondary level is the responsibility of the partners such as conducive, GAIN, and so many other international and local NGOs that are trying to support the industry. Now, to continue to build their capability and capacity to produce efficiently, cost effectively, to increase their productivity. Therefore, their bottom lines are raised and they can reduce their prices at the end of the day, despite the very harsh economic environment. And therefore, the consumers will be able to afford this. That's another. On the part of the producers themselves, they have to continuously communicate to their end consumers. These are the people that keep them in business. They have to keep them informed through their packages, through different, these days, internet of things. Information is like the cheapest thing these days. They have to communicate the nutritional benefits of their food, and they have to produce responsibly as well, and make sure that their consumers are constantly aware of the implication of choosing different types of foods that do not have adequate micronutrients. So I think it's a shared responsibility. And once consumers are aware, those of us that are at that level of, that have that decision-making advantage, those of us that have the opportunity to be educated. However, for those that do not have that opportunity as consumers, such as those that are below the pyramid, those that are in within the social safety net programs, I will reiterate over and again that the government and partners should please endorse the MFI and select those companies so that other companies are encouraged, because they are seeing their counterparts being more competitive. They are seeing their counterparts having more consumer base. They are then encouraged to participate in this self-regulatory initiative. And at the end of the day, I think if we do this for the next decade and a half or 2 decades, by 2030, we will be contributing, significantly to the SDG goal number 2, the zero hunger, which includes ending hunger as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Stella. Thank you so much for that insightful explanation. And lastly
My
today,
pleasure.
Dr. Adeyemi, I know you mentioned NAFDAC regulations based on food fortification. Are there other
Yeah.
regulatory frameworks that are currently in place in Nigeria to ensure food fortification compliance?
I'm aware of that of NAFDAC, which is very clear, has very clear content. But I do know that the Sun has the mandate to set the standards, which were contained in the August 2021 food fortification regulations. So I'm aware of that of SON, which requires every other institution, which also I'm sure part of that. I'm sure TechnoServe was part of the team that was on the technical team that drafted all the standards to ensure that both mandatory and voluntary fortification is permeates in our society. That voluntary by the industries make it who want to make a business case, and mandatory, which is required by some major food vehicles like wheat, salt, sugar, and vegetable oil has to be really fortified either with vitamin A for vegetable oil and for wheat, vitamin A and iron and zinc, then for iodine in salt. So basically, I would like to speak a little bit on the strategies now before going back to other regulations. Ms. Stella did mention things about social safety net programs. This is very, very key. She glossed over it, but it's very, very key that both government safety nets and the social security safety net programs are well in place. This will ensure that those beyond the pyramid, actually, I want to mention the Maslow's pyramid now. There are some far, far below that needs to be, they can be reached. Those in the riverine areas, those like in Lagos here, I sometimes take a drive to Morocco. I sometimes take a drive to those living quite offshore. I notice the abject poverty and what they eat. They're just nutritional diets, that's all they take. Other components of nutrition is missing. So we need a social safety net programs to actually capture this group. The middle class is beginning to feel the impact of the economic situation. And then, like she rightly said, the consumption of fruits and vegetables is declining seriously. I see it when I go to the food vendors. I see it when I go to the canteens here in the office. A lot of people avoid and they can't afford a portion of vegetables, which is quite expensive. And even when you afford the vegetable, is it well cooked? Is it not overcooked? And the nutritive value has been expended. So these are things that we need to look at. That means workforce education. I want to come to the workforce education. Those providing meals in the places of work need to be educated about how to manage this meal so that the nutritive content is not lost. That's the weakness in bio fortification, because the time from the farm to the table where it's consumed needs to be short. Otherwise, when food gets damaged, the nutrient that has been biofortified by either genetic means has been lost. So now the regulations. The international organizations and non-governmental organizations are really doing well. The NFI, I'm aware of it. Then also TechnoServe, correct me, Ms. Stella. There's a 4PG. There's also the 4PG framework that you developed, which is excellent. I love that. Yeah, the 4PG framework you developed. I really love that. Excellent. And then, so I want to say, this is my opinion, our observation being on the field, that the international organizations have really been the bridge between the private industry and public, which means the government. For example, in the forefront, not to advertise, but I need to say it, TechnoServe has been excellent in this, working with BASF, BASF Germany. TechnoServe has also been in the forefront supporting the Bill and Melinda Gates programs here in Nigeria with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. There's Kasfani. So TechnoServe has really been a great bridge and a trailblazer in bringing about the issues of micronutrient deficiency in Nigeria. So I would want to say that TechnoServe is part of those who are helping to regulate the system, albeit they are non-partisan, they are non-profit. So I want to say these are the three key agendas like this. That from the NAFDAC Act, SON's mandate to develop standards, and TechnoServe's foray in Nigeria to help bring into recognition what the regulations and the standards require, and to help consumers, both consumers, the producer, the private entity, and public, the government, to understand the importance of nutritional balance in public health space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Adeyemi. So we have come to the end of today's podcast. Thank you, Ms. Stella and Dr. Adeyemi, for participating in today's interesting program. So just as we've heard from the experts, it is important to fortify our food as it offers numerous benefits to producers that are compliant. And just like they said, it is important to incentivize producers that are compliant, and it is also important to endorse the MFI, that's the Micronutrient Food Fortification Index. Dr. Adeyemi also mentioned that there are 3 regulatory policies that are in place. So it is important to implement these policies, which are the NAFDAC regulations, the SON regulations, and the policies from TechnoServe. So thank you for joining in once again. You can learn more about food fortification by visiting www.nesgroup.org, or you can also learn about more interesting programs on www.nesgroup.org/podcast. Thank you once again. Bye.